Winter is a time for warmth, for quiet nights wrapped in blankets, for streets covered in endless snow. But beneath that peaceful silence, something far more unsettling waits. A lone driver spots a figure standing motionless on a deserted road, only to find no footprints in the snow. A man hears soft knocking at his cabin door in the middle of the night, but when he opens it, there's no one there. Winter's darkness hides many things, and tonight we're revealing some of its most terrifying secrets. On a freezing winter night, a hunter was making his way through a quiet, snow-covered road. The cold cut through his clothes, and the only sound was the crunch of his boots in the deep snow. Everything seemed normal, until he noticed something disturbing. Another set of footprints had appeared beside his own, fresh in the untouched snow. But he was alone. His heart pounded as he looked around. A dark figure was nearby, moving in sync with him. He called out, but there was no response. Fear took over, and he picked up his pace. No matter how fast he walked, the footprint stayed beside his, matching every step. In the distance, he spotted a cabin with a light glowing inside. Desperate for safety, he sprinted toward it and pounded on the door, hoping for help. An elderly man answered, concern written on his face. Once inside, the hunter explained what had happened. The old man listened carefully before sharing a chilling local legend. A vengeful spirit roamed the area on winter nights, following travelers and leading them to their doom. The hunter couldn't shake the feeling that he had come dangerously close to meeting that fate. Winter is best enjoyed amongst friends as you crack jokes and retell tales. 3 friends rented a remote cabin deep in the woods, hoping for a peaceful winter getaway. The drive was rough, with icy roads and an approaching blizzard, but the idea of a quiet retreat kept them going. The cabin looked like something out of a postcard, surrounded by snow-covered trees. Inside, the fireplace crackled, offering warmth against the freezing cold. As night fell, the wind howled outside, and the heavy snowfall made the forest eerily silent. Looking for something to do, the friends explored the cabin and found an old, dusty journal hidden behind a loose brick in the basement. Curious, they flipped through its pages. The journal belonged to a past guest who had written about unsettling experiences, whispers in the night, shifting shadows, and the constant feeling of being watched. The final entry was the most disturbing. "The forest doesn't want us here. It will do anything to reclaim its own." They laughed it off, convinced it was just a scary story. But as the night wore on, things started to feel wrong. Soft whispers echoed through the halls. Shadows moved when no one was near them. An uneasy feeling settled over the group. One friend, skeptical of the fear settling in, decided to step outside to prove there was nothing there. But as soon as he did, the wind carried strange murmurs, almost like voices. The trees swayed, as if something was lurking just beyond sight. Minutes passed, and he didn't return. The others, now worried, called out for him, but their voices were swallowed by the wind that howled. Then they saw him, standing at the edge of the forest, eyes wide with fear. When they got closer, he whispered about figures moving between the trees, calling his name, trying to lure him in. They rushed him back inside and locked the door. They spent the rest of the night huddled together, jumping at every sound. At sunrise, they grabbed their things and left, never looking back. In the isolated village of Frost Hollow, locals whispered about a ghostly figure that appeared on the coldest nights, luring people into the frozen wilderness. Most dismissed it as just a story, until one night Thomas came dangerously close to finding out the truth. That night, the wind howled, and the temperature dropped lower than ever before. Unable to sleep, Thomas sat by the fire, watching the flames flicker. Then through the wind, he heard something strange, a soft, eerie lullaby. Curious, he looked outside. Through the swirling snow, he saw a woman standing at the edge of the forest. She wore a long, flowing white gown, her hair draping over her shoulders. She didn't speak, just lifted her hand and beckoned him forward. Despite the freezing cold, something about her made him step toward the door. He opened it, feeling the icy air rush in. When he called out, she didn't answer, just kept gesturing for him to follow. Something about her movements felt unnatural, yet he felt an unshakable pull toward her. As he stepped outside, boots crunching in the snow, a firm hand suddenly grabbed his shoulder. Startled, he turned to see his neighbor Samuel standing there, his face pale. "Get inside, now," Samuel said, voice shaking. "It's the Frost Maiden. She lures men to their deaths." Thomas hesitated, but the fear in Samuel's eyes was enough. He let the older man lead him back inside, locking the door behind them. Over a cup of tea, Samuel told the story. The Frost Maiden was said to be the ghost of a woman who had died in the snow long ago. Every winter she returned, searching for someone to join her. Thomas didn't sleep that night. You never know what you may encounter in the silent winter night, whether it's just shapes in the blizzard or something set to take you with it. David was completely alone in his remote cabin deep in the forest. A brutal snowstorm raged outside, cutting him off from the nearest town. The wind howled, shaking the cabin, while the fire in the hearth provided the only source of warmth and light. As midnight neared, David sat in his chair trying to focus on a book. The storm wasn't letting up, and the cold pressed in. Then, breaking through the wind's roar, came a sound, soft, deliberate knocking at the front door. He froze. Who would be out in this weather? He walked to the door slowly, the floor creaking under his feet. Peering through the peephole, he saw only swirling snow. He called out, but no one answered. Trying to shake off his unease, he told himself it was just a tree branch. He returned to his chair, but before he could settle, the knocking came again, louder, more insistent. Something wasn't right. Gripping a flashlight, he unlocked the door and swung it open. The freezing wind hit him instantly. He shined the light outside, but there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of life, just untouched snow. Heart pounding. He shut and bolted the door. He stayed awake, listening. Hours passed. Just as he was starting to relax, the knocking returned, this time with faint whispers. David sat, paralyzed, until the first light of dawn. As soon as the storm cleared, he stepped outside to check for tracks. The snow was untouched. No one had been there, or at least no one who left footprints. Haunted by the experience, David couldn't shake the feeling that he had been visited by something beyond comprehension, perhaps beyond this dimension. Sarah was completely snowed in, trapped inside her remote countryside home as a brutal blizzard raged outside. The wind howled, rattling the old house, and the heavy snow blocked the doors and windows. She was entirely alone. Before settling in for the night, she locked every door and window, wrapping herself in a blanket with a book to distract from the eerie silence. But something felt off. The storm seemed to carry whispers, and every creak in the house felt unnatural. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and she drifted off to sleep on the couch. Sometime later, a sound woke her, a soft, irregular tapping. Still groggy, she listened closely. It wasn't the wind. It was coming from inside the house. Nervous but determined, she followed the sound to the kitchen. Her breath caught in her throat. The back door was open, snow blowing in. She was sure she had locked it. Quickly, she shut and bolted it, scanning the house for any sign of an intruder. Everything looked normal, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. Then she saw them, wet footprints leading from the back door, stopping right next to the couch where she had been sleeping. They ended there, heart pounding. She grabbed her phone, but the storm had knocked out the signal. Clutching a kitchen knife, she huddled in the corner, every shadow and sound sending her pulse racing. The night dragged on. When morning finally came, she stepped outside to check for tracks. There were none. No footprints in the fresh snow. No sign that anyone had ever been there. On a quiet weekend, Mark decided to camp alone in a remote forest. The small campsite had 3 empty spots, and he chose one on the far left. As he set up, the silence of the woods surrounded him. An hour later, he wandered back to his truck, only to find an old, rusted red car parked beside it. It had no license plates, no sign of anyone. Unease crept in, but he brushed it off and returned to his campsite. Then footsteps. A man emerged from the trees, disheveled, with a stained jacket and wild hair. "You wouldn't mind helping me with something later, would you?" he asked. Mark, unsure but polite, agreed. The man nodded, thanked him, and walked away. Hours passed. Darkness fell. Mark had almost forgotten about the encounter when footsteps returned, slow and deliberate. The man stepped into the firelight. "You ready?" he asked. "For what?" Mark questioned. "You'll see. Won't take long." The man smiled. It felt wrong. As Mark hesitated, the man started leading him into the pitch-black forest, without a flashlight. Mark followed for a few minutes, his unease growing. "So, what do you need help with?" he asked again. Silence. The man didn't answer. Then he suddenly stopped, turned, and stared at Mark. His smile vanished. His hand dipped into his jacket. Mark ran. The man chased him, heavy footsteps pounding behind. But after a minute, the sounds faded. Mark didn't stop until he was far, far away. Mark gave a full description, but with no license plate, no evidence, and only his chilling account, there was little they could do. The terrifying realization dawned on him. This had been planned. The man had tested him during the day, building trust, waiting until the dead of night to lure him away. And Ethan had almost followed. These stories serve as chilling reminders of how the stillness of winter can mask dangers lurking just beyond our doorsteps. Whether it's a strange figure, an eerie knock, or a silent presence in the cold night, these encounters remind us that not everything in the snow-covered silence is peaceful. Some of these moments could have turned deadly if not for quick thinking, a locked door, or the protection of a watchful eye. As we face the darkness, let's remember to always stay alert, because in the quietest winter nights, danger might be closer than we think.